Before we get to the juicy documents, we need context. Why on earth was the CIA interested in a giant hairy biped? They weren't monster hunters, they were communist hunters. In the 1950s, the Himalayas were a massive strategic chessboard. China had just invaded Tibet. India and Nepal were nervous. The CIA needed eyes and ears on the border to monitor Chinese troop movements. The problem is that area is incredibly remote, incredibly high, and incredibly dangerous. Who goes there? Mountaineers, explorers, people looking to conquer Everest. And in the 1950s, Yeti fever was gripping the world. There were countless expeditions launched to find the Abominable Snowmen. Here's the intelligence angle. If you are the CIA and you want to send an agent into a sensitive border zone without looking suspicious, what's the perfect cover story? I'm not a spy, comrade. I'm just looking for Bigfoot. The hunt for the creature became intertwined with the hunt for intelligence, and because agents have to report everything they see and hear to their superiors back at Langley, the CIA archives started filling up with reports about local legends, strange footprints in the snow, and the diplomatic headaches caused by monster hunters. The CIA wasn't looking for the Yeti. They just kept tripping over him. Okay, enough of a preamble. Let's look at the smoking gun. This is, without a doubt, my favorite document in the entire CREST database. It proves that the U.S. government didn't just know about the hunt for the Yeti, they were involved in regulating it. Let's look at document number CIA-RDP 80R01731R0030001300002-7. Dated December 1959. It's a memo from the American Embassy in Kathmandu, Nepal, sent to the Department of State and forwarded to the CIA. The subject line, Regulations Governing Mountain Climbing Expeditions in Nepal Relating to the Yeti. This isn't a joke memo written on a slow Friday. It's an official transmission relaying the laws established by the government of Nepal concerning, and I quote, the Yeti, or Abominable Snowman. There were three main rules, and folks, they're pretty spectacular. Rule number 1, and I'm reading verbatim from the CIA file, royalty of 5,000 rupees will be paid to His Majesty's Government of Nepal for a permit to carry out an expedition in search of the Yeti, end quote. 5,000 rupees in 1959 money, that's a serious chunk of change just for a permit to look. The Nepali government recognized a cash cow when they saw one. But rule number 2 is where it gets serious. Quote, in case Yeti is traced, it can be photographed or caught alive, but it must not be killed or shot at, except in an emergency arising out of self-defense. All photos taken of the animal, the creature itself, if captured alive or dead, must be surrendered to the government of Nepal at the earliest time. End quote. Let that sink in. The CIA holds a document detailing the rules of engagement for a Yeti fight. You can only shoot Bigfoot in self-defense, and if you capture him, he's the property of the King of Nepal. Imagine being the desk officer at Langley reading this in 1959. And finally, rule number 3, the secrecy clause. Quote, news and reports throwing light on the actual existence of the creature must be submitted to the government of Nepal as soon as they are available and must not in any way be given to the press or reporters for publication without permission of the government of Nepal, end quote. A total media blackout. If you find the greatest zoological discovery in human history, you have to tell the Nepali government first. Why? Because if the Yeti was real, it was a strategic asset. While this document is technically Nepali law, its existence in CIA files shows that the U.S. was closely monitoring the situation. They needed to know who was climbing these mountains and what they were looking for. If a team of scientists suddenly found a bipedal primate on the Chinese border, that was an international incident. Why was the CIA so concerned with these regulations? Because like everything else in the Cold War, if the Americans were interested, the Soviets were obsessed. We have reports indicating that the USSR took the snowman issue much more seriously from a scientific standpoint than the US did. The Soviets sent actual Academy of Science expeditions into the Pamir Mountains to look for what they called the almas. The CIA had to know, what if the Russians find it first? It sounds silly today, but think about the propaganda victory. The USSR, the champion of materialism, proving that a missing link exists, shattering Western science and religion in one blow. The CIA monitored the Soviet interest closely. There are scattered references and daily intelligence briefings about USSR scientific expeditions near sensitive borders, where the search for the snowman served as a convenient excuse for mapping strategic passes. The Yeti wasn't just an animal, he was a pawn in a great game. Now we have to take a slight detour. The documents we just looked at are hard diplomatic cables, but if you widen the search, if you step just outside the CIA and look at the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, and the Army, things go completely off the rails in the 70s. We have to talk about Project Stargate. This was the U.S. government's real multi-million-dollar program to investigate remote viewing using psychic powers to spy on the enemy. And yes, They used it to look for Bigfoot. I just learned this, which is a shame because I already made the episode about Project Stargate, but they used it to look for Bigfoot. In the declassified files surrounding Stargate, you can find transcripts of remote viewing sessions where psychics were tasked with locating targets. One famous declassified session involved a remote viewer given coordinates in the Pacific Northwest. The viewer described a large, hairy, non-human primate. The viewer, obviously confused, described the target as, quote, "I'm getting a very large creature. It looks like a man, but it's very hairy. It's watching me. It has immense power, and it smells awful." End quote. The government handlers didn't laugh. They filed it. Why bring this up? Because it shows the mindset. The intelligence community was willing to put money and resources into fringe topics if there was even a 1% chance it could offer an advantage. If they were willing to use psychics to find Soviet submarines, you better believe that they were willing to file reports on Yeti footprints in Nepal. So what do these documents prove? Do they prove the Sasquatch is real and currently chilling in a CIA black site bunker somewhere in Virginia? No. But they prove something almost as interesting about how our world works. They prove that the boundary between high-stake geopolitics and folklore is much thinner than we think. The documents show us an intelligence agency that couldn't afford to ignore anything. When you're fighting a global Cold War, a rumor of a giant monster in a strategic mountain pass isn't a campfire story. It's a variable. It's a cover story for an agent. It's a potential propaganda weapon for the enemy. It's a diplomatic regulation you have to navigate. The CIA files on the Yeti are real. They are boringly bureaucratic, which is exactly what makes them so fascinating. They treated the Abominable Snowmen not as a ghost story, but as a logistical issue. And hey, if you're ever planning a hiking trip to Nepal, especially in 1959, remember, 5,000 rupees for the permit, and only shoot in self-defense. We have only scratched the surface of what's hidden in these archives. Sure, we didn't find the time machine today, but while I was digging through the CREST database for this episode, I kept running into files relating to something else, something much darker than a Himalayan snow beast. Files that talk about mind control, about dosing unsuspecting American citizens with LSD, about trying to create the perfect programmed assassin. Next time we aren't looking for monsters outside, we're looking at monsters the CIA tried to create inside the human mind. We're going to dive into MK Ultra. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the weird side of history, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next archive drop. Trust no one. Keep reading the files. I'll see you next time.